That's a really great question, and I think I'm going to probably take it from a more personal perspective, because I could certainly talk about, if you see something, say something. I could talk about situational awareness. I could talk about being prepared to respond, in a professional manner and render emergency care and things like that. But I'm going to talk about something that's even more important, which is don't sweat the little things, right? Like thousands of people got up and went to work. That was it. They went to work and they didn't come back. And some of them, maybe fought about leaving the milk out or, not picking out the garbage or, something silly. And does any of that really matter? So for me, you can't really shake me. Like those little things are just not important. What is important is humanity. And I think we're suffering a little bit right now trying to find that. But it's important that you just don't sweat the little things. The people who are around you that love you and you love, they should know that every day. And those little things that annoy you about them are the things you'll miss. So why bother, right? Why waste time? Have a good life, right? Choose to be positive. Choose to give. Choose to be compassionate and forgiving and, choose to be a part of the solution and not the problem. And I think sometimes we lose that. It's odd that 20 years ago, we were dealing with the biggest thing our country had seen. And 20 years from then, we're dealing with the biggest thing our country has seen. In this global pandemic with, more than 500,000 people dead of this virus that we're trying to get a handle on. And the level of humanity, I would say, is a little different right now than it was 20 years ago. So it's important to bring yourself back to that. Like, if this person went to work and didn't come back, what would you want to say? So say it, right? So say it. Say it while you have a chance. And everything else falls in place. I think that would be the message I would take, and say, that's an important one.
To be very honest with you, that brought the country together, unfortunately, okay? No matter where you were, people were talking about it, people were aware of it. Neighbors were actually getting involved, and they were standing on the front lawns and saying, gee, maybe we should give blood, or maybe we should donate, maybe we should make food to the local firehouse, things along those lines. There was a lot more camaraderie at that point. Looking back at things, you realize I worked on the pile with the Royal Mounted Canadian Police. I worked on the pile with Chicago, with Florida, with Australia. I made a lot of friends through that. But at the same time, 20 years later, it seems to be fading away. Everybody's, not that aware of it, and they're not exactly that, receptive to what we're trying to do. It's a part of history. Everybody, including the kids that weren't born yet, they should be taught about it. And it should be a thing that the country should be putting on one of their, top priorities as to remember. There were 880 children from the fire department. Their parents were lost. 880 kids were left without a parent. So, like I said, things along those lines can really hit home, even in a situation like today, where it would be nice to remember them and keep them in your thoughts and prayers.
As we say, the mantra of the fire department, or the promise that we make to our families, is to never forget. And some places or some people have truly forgotten or believe that it could never happen again. Well, as we know, we think, God forbid it ever happens again, but it's possible. But the main thing is you can never forget. Like, there's been times where, different people say, well, why do they read the names every year? And, we have friends, we all lost a lot of friends, but we have a couple guys that work within our unit or family assistance unit that lost their brother, and just asking them, they said, it means the world that once a year, at least once a year, my brother's name is read aloud. Because some people say, well, all the names are on the memorial, why does it need to be, it needs to be read aloud, just these things, they can't be forgotten. They, forever and ever, one of the traditions in the fire department is we put a bronze plaque when a person dies. On the 1-year anniversary, we have a ceremony where we dedicate the bronze plaque. But that plaque goes on a wall in a firehouse or an EMS station to basically, that member's name is gonna live forever. The tradition is the senior people there, when the junior person comes in, explains, what happened to each individual, what that plaque, and then 25 years later, when that junior person is now the senior person, it continues and the same thing and explains. So that perpetuates, that member's name again, helping us with that promise to never forget.
From the experience of 9/11, of experiencing almost dying, the sacrifice that John Shapura made, someone very close to me who was my mentor and I was his probie, had sacrificed his life to be able to, as myself, to not waste time, not take for granted that I'm going to be here, especially when 9/11 was on a blue sky day. It was absolutely gorgeous day, to not take those days for granted either, but to process my life and to make sure that I do the most that I can and cherish and give the way that I can. Lives were lost, that I should be able to respect time that has been given to me in order to live my life and make it productive. The message that I would want to give to people in regards to 9/11 is, to me, even still being in this role, a lot of first responders really don't want the credit for the work that they do because they love what they do and they don't really consider it as work sometimes. Even though you get crazy hours, it can be very stressful when first responders get out of bed, when first responders leave their families, when first responders are just walking down the street, even off duty. Our nature is to help. First responders really love their community. So when you really think like no one cares about you and no one loves you, you could walk into stations, you can talk to first responders on the street, and the compassion, I think that's the biggest message that I want people to feel. So when they see, a fire truck going by, or any first responders going by, and you hear the sirens going off, know that people in those vehicles are really showing their love for their community by sacrificing themselves every day. So especially the people from 9/11 walking upstairs, knowing that they were not going to come out, or were praying for themselves and their own families that they would be able to see them again, and they didn't. That's the biggest thing that I want people to really understand and acknowledge. And I think that first responders don't get enough respect as they should, and that the community really needs to embrace them and love them as much as they love the community.
My ambulance used to cover Red Hook, Brooklyn. And Red Hook, Brooklyn was known as not a gentle place. It was definitely, without a doubt, rough around the edges. And when we would respond into those buildings, there were times where you definitely felt very, very uncomfortable, and as they say, watch your six. You and your partner always took care of each other, and it was a tough area. And I remember a couple of days after 9/11, I went to the local firehouse in 202 and Ladder 101, where they lost 11 members. And I remember as we were standing outside, we were talking to the men and looking down the street and seeing maybe 300 to 400 people from the Red Hook community marching towards us with a pastor. The pastor and that whole community got up in front of us, and the pastor said a prayer, and everybody from that community lined up one by one and gave us condolences. And it just felt like everybody in New York City became your family. Everybody became tight. Everybody was out for the same thing. It felt so good to, sometimes you would just be walking and seeing somebody on the street and you just shake each other's heads to each other and like, how are you? Or, you know, people are holding the door for each other, or, you know, if you were driving, a car would stop and let you in. And that hasn't happened in a while now. And I'm sorry that somehow, as a people, we got away from that. And I miss, I'd say, having more of the community feel like they were my family. And I try to do that for myself. I try to, you know, do that for others. And I think if everybody did that and tried to bring that back a little bit and do a little bit of good for other people besides just themselves, and it feels great. It really does. It feels good. I think if people can do that, I think this world would be a much better place.